guys, my name's Isaac Arthur and I'm from CODO Design here in Indianapolis, Indiana. We are a food and beverage branding firm founded on the belief that we can create better work by putting collaboration at the center of everything we do. And this is the first in our series where we're going to dive into some of the topics and theory covered in our new book, Craft Beer Rebranded. This is a 180-page book and a 60-page companion workbook that together will help you navigate each step of your brewery's rebrand from initial planning all the way through launch. You can check this out at craftbeerrebranded.com. And I would highly suggest buying a copy because they're going pretty quickly. So check that out. And to kick this series off, we want to discuss the differences between a brand refresh and a rebrand. That's something that we call evolution versus revolution in our book. And I want to start by defining a brand refresh. So a brand refresh is an update. You can call it a fresh coat of paint. Your core brand values and positioning still hold true, but your brand identity may be showing its age. Maybe your beer isn't selling as well as it used to, your marketing materials and other communications might be a bit tired. The biggest point here is that through a refresh, you won't look overwhelmingly different from where you started. You'll look sharper, you will look more consistent and definitely more contemporary, and this is why we call it evolution. It evolves directly what you already have in a very clear way. Contrast this with rebranding. So a true rebrand would represent a shift in your core messaging and positioning. This can include redefining your core values, your brand essence, all of that en route to developing up to and including a new name, potentially a new look and feel, starting with your logo, your packaging, your website, and extending to all of your other touch points. And this is a deep and significant change, hence calling it revolution. So let's look at a few case studies that we covered in our book. We will begin with a brand refresh we developed with Left Field Brewery out of Toronto, Canada. So Left Field is awesome. They're a wildly popular baseball-themed brewery that was doing everything right. Their beer was fantastic. They were always innovating and improving beer quality in their lab and their tasting room and their customer service and experience. And sales were trending up at a solid clip, and they began running into some issues that we see in a lot of breweries from that growth. While their story and positioning were rock solid, they were dealing with a thinly developed identity system consisting really of a simple logo and lackluster can designs. This created two problems or opportunities, depending on how you'd like to look at it. The first is that they wanted to flesh out their brand identity with a refined core logo, which would be a very direct update of their existing mark. They also wanted to build out a deeper set of secondary and tertiary icons that could be deployed across merch. They had a great merch program, they're baseball themed, and they wanted to ramp that up with a suite of dedicated iconography. The second big problem that they were dealing with, and this is something that I bet a lot of breweries out there who are watching this are dealing with, is that they were getting slammed with their production schedule. They were releasing one canned beer, they are to this day, one canned beer per week to keep up with the demands of Rotation Nation. That's happening up in Canada too, my friends. and they were just getting hammered with the effort required in designing all of that packaging and staying on schedule. From a production standpoint. So because they had this loose template and keeping up with that release calendar, it was a huge challenge for them. So the big takeaway here and what makes this a brand refresh is that we would not be making, CODO would not be making any substantial changes to their core identity. Everything we would do would be subtle and require a very subtle, light touch. So I'm going to fast forward here a bit. Our team flew up to Toronto. We got really drunk with them. We spent a few days working with their team to dive into Left Field's history and build on what was already working. This culminated in a subtle update to their core logo, that robust secondary icon system I mentioned, and the new can template that has allowed them to update and kick out dozens of new styles whenever they need. This has all been really successful. They've already developed several dozen new cans, as I mentioned, and amazing pieces of merch since we wrapped that up. And it's been really fun watching them grow. So you can check that out, and you can see more of that case study in Craft Beer Rebranded or at craftbeerrebranded.com. Okay, now let's go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and discuss a full rebrand. So Atlanta Brewing, formerly Red Brick Brewing, they were looking to breathe new life into their brand ahead of their 25th anniversary. They're 26 now. We worked with them in their 24th year. So like many older breweries, they had spent the better part of the last decade getting squeezed from both ends of the market. New breweries would open up and steal away off-premise sales and excitement. And of course, Big Beer is always there driving down pricing through its vast distribution network. Add to that some weird missteps along the way, like switching the name from Atlanta to Red Brick. I think they flew under that banner for 7 or 8 years, starting around 2010, and a period of beer quality and distribution that further hurt their reputation. So over the last 5 or 6 years, they have begun riding that ship. They've completely reinvented themselves with an amazing team. It's a bunch of sweethearts, some of the smartest folks we've ever worked with. And this meant that they completely revamped their brewing program and portfolio, leading to what is now regarded as some of the best beer in the South. and their marketing and distribution and leadership were squared away. And with all of these elements in place, they decided that it finally made sense to pull the trigger on a rebrand and take back their original name and announce to the world that Atlanta Brewing is worth drinking again. So we worked with their team on a sweeping renaming, rebranding, and repositioning overhaul that helped them tell the story of a compelling Georgia brewery, the oldest brewery in Georgia, one that's weathered recessions, an eminent domain forced brewery relocation. They had to pick up their brewery and move across town at one point. They've weathered the craft beer boom itself in a rapidly changing cityscape. And this played out over an updated brand identity system, packaging, merch, website. It's been really fun to watch them flourish since we launched that work. And on that note, I might add that it also led to a 26.6% increase year over year in their core beer sales and about a 114% jump in merch as well. And I have a feeling that that will continue to trend up as they continue reintroducing themselves to the market. So Atlanta Brewing would be a wholesale rebrand down to their very name, and this is definitely different from Left Field's refresh. But here's where these can seem semantic. So we recently rebranded a 23-year-old brewery in Montana called Kettle House. They're one of the largest and most popular breweries in the state, and they've been more or less using the same logo for 23 years, and their packaging hadn't seen any real major updates since it debuted back in 2006. So we conducted a brand audit and weighed their brand equity. That's something that we're going to discuss in our next video. And it became quickly apparent that we couldn't do much to their logo and packaging. They needed to be updated for sure, but the yellow K in their old logo was sacrosanct, and the packaging and colors and illustration were equally as iconic. Basically, there was no way that we could substantially change their logo and packaging without confusing and angering the good people of Montana and losing a significant amount of brand equity. This could lead to a dip in sales, a dip in goodwill, potentially angry mobs, dogs and cats living together. It would have been really bad. So given this, we carried out a subtle update across the board, which primarily entailed decluttering their main mark, reining in the number of typefaces, and improving legibility across the board. We extended this approach to their packaging as well, with updated illustrations and a consistent layout so that the logo, description, government warning, illustrations, all that jazz, were all in the same place in every single box and can, stuff like that. And I bring this up to say this is why rebranding versus refreshing, the terms themselves can be confusing. I would call Kettle House a full rebrand due to the scope of the visuals that we updated, but like Left Field, Kettle House was doing everything right, save for their dated visuals. We didn't drastically refine their positioning or core messaging. They had that stuff squared away. We came in and gutted their house down to the studs and rebuilt it. It had the same foundation for sure, but we put on an entirely new exterior and landscaping and fixtures and appliances, maybe a pool. You know, this is not a good metaphor. I'm gonna ditch that. Hopefully you understand what I'm saying. Either way, the differences between a full rebrand and refresh can seem semantic. And if you feel like you need to make substantial changes to your brewery's name, certainly, but to your messaging and positioning along with your visuals, so your identity and packaging, then I would call that a brewery rebrand. If you are simply tweaking some of these elements, like your brand identity, but maintaining the same general theme, I'd call it a brand refresh. In our next piece in the series, we're going to discuss how you actually determine which of these approaches, evolution versus revolution, is right for your brewery by weighing your brewery's brand equity. I want to thank you guys for watching today. You can read all about this over at craftbeerrebranded.com. Again, you should buy your book and you should buy it soon because these are going very quickly. I cannot suggest it enough, especially if you are a brewery that is considering one of these approaches, rebranding or refreshing. So thanks again for tuning in. We will hit you soon with another video, and I appreciate your time today. Cheers.